The Zithurian marriage market on Station Commerce 9 was one of the most controversial institutions in the galaxy. It was also, technically, completely legal. The Zithurians were a matriarchal society whose females outnumbered males 20 to 1, a genetic quirk that had shaped their entire culture. In Zithurian tradition, females purchased marriage contracts from males' families, essentially buying husbands for predetermined periods. The practice had continued even as the Zithurians joined galactic society, causing endless diplomatic incidents and ethical debates. Most species found it barbaric. The Zithurians considered it practical economics. Jack Morrison found it while drunk. He'd been on Commerce 9 for 3 days, his cargo ship undergoing repairs after a navigation computer failure. With nothing to do and too much cheap station liquor in his system, he'd wandered into the Zithurian district and found himself staring at a digital marketplace displaying profiles of males available for marriage contracts. Most listings were expensive, 10,000 credits for a 5-year contract with a successful merchant, 50,000 for a warrior with distinguished lineage, 200,000 for a scholar with multiple advanced degrees. The Zithurian females bid competitively, driving prices higher based on the male's perceived value. Then Jack saw her listing buried at the bottom of the market, Sira Kithrak, age 247, seeking marriage contract, offering 2 credits. 2 credits, not 2,000, 2. The profile picture showed a Zithurian female with the characteristic blue-gray skin and silver hair of her species, but her image was poorly lit and obviously old. Her bio was sparse. Farmer. Rural district, no notable achievements, willing to negotiate contract terms. Jack, drunk and curious, clicked for more information. The extended profile revealed why Sira's listing was priced so low. She lived on Zithuria 4, a backwater agricultural colony far from the homeworld. She was considered old by Zithurian standards, past the age where most females had secured multiple marriage contracts. She had no family wealth, no social connections, no prestigious achievements. In Zithurian society's brutal hierarchy, she was worthless. The marketplace showed she'd been listed for 3 years, 3 years without a single bid, even at 2 credits. Something in Jack's alcohol-soaked brain decided this was both tragic and hilarious. 2 credits for a wife, that was less than the beer in his hand. It was an insult, a joke, a complete mockery of the already questionable system. Before his sober mind could stop him, Jack placed a bid, 2.1 credits. He woke up the next morning with a pounding headache and 17 messages from the Zithurian Marriage Bureau informing him that his bid had been accepted, contract terms were being finalized, and he had 30 days to travel to Zithuria 4 to claim his wife or forfeit his bid and face legal penalties for breach of contract. "Oh no," Jack groaned, reading through the messages. "Oh no, no, no." His first instinct was to pay the forfeit and forget the whole thing. But the legal penalties were steep, 5,000 credits and a permanent mark on his commercial trader's license. And something else nagged at him as he reread Sira's profile in the sober light of day. 3 years. She'd been listed for 3 years at 2 credits and no one had bid, not even as a joke, not even out of pity. How desperate did someone have to be to value themselves at 2 credits? How lonely. Jack made a decision that his friends would later call either the most compassionate or most idiotic thing he'd ever done. He booked passage to Zithuria 4. The colony was exactly as advertised, a rural agricultural world, barely developed beyond basic infrastructure. Sira's farm was 2 hours by ground transport from the spaceport, a modest plot of land growing crystalline grain that the Zithurians used for their staple foods. The woman who answered the door was older than her profile picture, which had clearly been taken decades ago. Her silver hair was streaked with white, her blue-gray skin marked with the lines of hard labor and sun exposure. She stood about 6 feet tall, average for Zethurian females, with a strong, weathered frame that spoke of years of physical work. She stared at Jack in obvious surprise. "You're human." "Yeah," Jack said awkwardly. "I'm Jack Morrison. I won the bid for your marriage contract." Sierra's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked like resignation. "You placed a bid on my contract as a joke." It wasn't a question. Jack felt his face heat with shame. "It started as, look, I was drunk and I saw the price and I thought," he stopped, realizing nothing he could say would make this better. "I'm sorry. I know this is weird and probably offensive, and I can pay the forfeit if you want to cancel the whole thing." Sierra was quiet for a long moment, studying him with eyes that held more intelligence than her sparse profile had suggested. "You traveled 2 weeks to get here. You could have just paid the forfeit and never contacted me." "I could have," Jack admitted. "But I kept thinking about someone valuing themselves at 2 credits, about being listed for 3 years with no bids, about what that must feel like." He met her eyes. "Nobody deserves that, not even as a stranger." Something shifted in Sierra's expression, surprise maybe, or the faint beginning of hope. "Come inside, we should talk." Over cups of Zethurian grain tea, Sierra told Jack her story. She'd been married twice before, both contracts purchased by her family when she was young. The first husband had been abusive. The second had simply been indifferent, treating the marriage as a business transaction and nothing more. Both contracts had ended, and she'd chosen to leave the cities, leave her family's expectations, and start over on a frontier world where she could farm in peace. "I listed the contract because Zethurian law requires it," Sierra explained. "Unmarried females over 200 face social penalties, reduced water allocations, limited market access, exclusion from community decision-making. It's designed to enforce our traditional marriage system." She smiled bitterly. "I set the price at 2 credits thinking no one would bid. I just wanted to satisfy the legal requirement without actually entering another marriage." "But I bid," Jack said. "You bid, a drunk human who apparently felt sorry for me." Sierra's tone wasn't accusatory, just matter of fact. "What happens now? The contract is legally binding. You're technically my husband for the next 5 years unless we both agree to dissolve it, which carries penalties for both of us." Jack was quiet, thinking. He'd spent the 2-week journey researching Zethurian marriage law, trying to understand what he'd accidentally gotten himself into. The contracts were binding but flexible. Spouses weren't required to live together, weren't required to have children, weren't even required to interact regularly. They just had to maintain the legal status. "What if we made it a partnership instead of a marriage?" he suggested. "I'm a cargo hauler. I travel constantly for work anyway. I could help you with the farm when I'm between jobs, provide financial support when you need it, and satisfy the legal requirements without forcing you into another relationship you don't want." "Why would you do that?" Sierra asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "You owe me nothing. This entire situation is absurd." "Because you deserve better than being valued at 2 credits," Jack replied. "Because the system that forces women to buy husbands or face penalties is wrong, and maybe I can't change it, but I can at least help one person navigate it. And because," he hesitated, "because everyone deserves to be chosen, to matter to someone, even if it starts as a drunk mistake." Sierra stared at him for a long moment, her eyes glistening with something Jack recognized as unshed tears. "You're either the kindest person I've ever met or the strangest." "Probably both," Jack admitted. They formalized the contract the next day, a 5-year marriage agreement with terms they'd negotiated together. Jack would visit when his shipping routes allowed, would help with farm work and expenses, and would maintain their legal marriage status. In return, Sierra would provide him a place to stay between jobs and meals when he visited. It was practical, businesslike, free of the romantic expectations that had poisoned Sierra's previous marriages. It should have stayed that way. But something happened over the following months. Jack found himself scheduling his cargo runs to pass near Zethuria far more frequently than logistics required. He'd spend a few days at the farm, helping Sierra repair equipment or harvest grain, and find himself reluctant to leave. They'd talk over dinner about his travels, her farming, their very different cultures and perspectives. Sierra was brilliant, Jack discovered. She'd studied agricultural engineering at university before her first marriage, then abandoned it when her husband demanded she focus on traditional female duties. She designed the farm's irrigation system herself, created hybrid grain varieties that yielded twice the standard crop, and managed complex crop rotations that kept the soil healthy without chemical treatments. "You could be teaching at universities," Jack said one evening, watching her analyze soil samples with equipment she'd built from salvaged parts. "Why bury yourself out here?" "Because at universities I'd be valued for my marriage status first and my work second," Sierra replied. "Here the grain doesn't care if I have a prestigious husband, it just grows or doesn't based on what I do," she smiled. "Besides, I like the peace. The cities are exhausting." Jack understood that. He'd chosen cargo hauling partially because it meant being alone with his thoughts, moving between worlds without getting too entangled anywhere. But increasingly, he found himself thinking that being entangled with Sierra might not be so bad. The realization hit him 6 months into their arrangement. He was helping Sierra install a new irrigation pump, wrestling with a stubborn bolt, when she laughed at something he'd said, really laughed, the kind of open, joyful sound he'd never heard from her before. The setting sun caught her silver hair, and for a moment Jack forgot completely about the bolt and the pump and everything except how beautiful she was. Oh no, he thought, this was supposed to be practical, business, safe. He was falling in love with his accidental wife. Jack tried to fight it. He took longer routes, stayed away for weeks at a time, reminded himself that Sierra had been clear about not wanting romance. But his cargo hold started filling with things for her, replacement parts for her equipment, books on advanced agricultural techniques, luxury foods she never bought for herself. "You're spending too much on me," Sierra protested when he arrived with a new generator. "The contract doesn't require." "I know what the contract requires," Jack interrupted. "This isn't about the contract." Sierra went very still. "Jack, I know," he said quickly. "I know you didn't want this. I know the deal was practical partnership, nothing more. I'm not asking you to feel the same way, He struggled for words. "I can't keep pretending this is just business for me anymore. You're not an obligation or a contract. You're someone I look forward to seeing, someone I think about when I'm halfway across the galaxy, someone I love," Sierra finished quietly. Jack met her eyes. "Yeah, I love you. And I know that's not what you signed up for, so if you want me to leave, to fulfill the contract from a distance and not complicate things." Sierra kissed him. It was tentative, uncertain, like someone remembering how to do something they'd thought they'd forgotten. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with tears. "I've been married twice," she whispered. "Both times purchased through the market, both times treated like property. I swore I'd never let myself care for another husband." She touched Jack's face with gentle fingers. "But you weren't purchased, were you?" "Not really. You chose me, chose to stay, to help, to see value where the entire galaxy saw worthlessness. And somewhere along the way I stopped thinking of you as my contract husband and started thinking of you as mine." "So what happens now?" Jack asked. "Now we figure out what a real marriage looks like," Sierra replied. "Not one bought and sold, but one chosen. Built on something other than economic transaction or social obligation." She smiled through her tears. "We build something new." They did build something new. Jack reconfigured his cargo routes to make Zethuria for a regular hub. Sira expanded her farm with his financial backing and started teaching agricultural techniques to other colony farmers. They transformed the marriage contract from a legal technicality into a genuine partnership. Word spread across Cytheria 4 and eventually beyond. The human who'd bid 2.1 credits for a wife and ended up proving that love could transcend marketplace economics. Other humans started appearing at the Cytherian marriage market, seeking out the low-priced listings of women society had deemed worthless, offering genuine partnership instead of exploitation. The practice caused diplomatic controversy. The Cytherian government accused humans of undermining their traditional systems. Earth's diplomatic corps worried about cultural interference. But the marriages kept happening and they kept working. 2 years into their contract, Jack and Sira sat on their porch watching Cytheria 4's twin moons rise over the grain fields. They'd just finished a meal with 3 other human Cytherian couples who'd formed similar partnerships, relationships born from what others saw as a ridiculous system but built into something genuine. "Do you ever regret it?" Sira asked quietly. "The drunk bid that started all this," Jack pulled her close. "Not for a second. Best 2.1 credits I ever spent." "I was worth more than 2 credits," Sira protested, laughing. "You were worth everything," Jack corrected. "The whole galaxy was just too blind to see it. Lucky for me, I was drunk enough to look past the price tag and see the person." When their 5-year contract expired, they renewed it. Not because Cytherian law required it, but because they wanted to. They rewrote the terms entirely, not as purchaser and purchased, but as equal partners choosing each other freely. The renewal contract price was still 2.1 credits. They kept it that way as a reminder of where they'd started, how something the galaxy considered worthless could become priceless when approached with genuine care and choice. Jack Morrison had proven that love could conquer all, not by grand gestures or impossible heroics, but by seeing value where others saw none. By choosing someone when no one else would. By believing that every person deserved to be more than a price tag in a marketplace. And Sira Kithrak, the woman the galaxy valued at 2 credits, proved that worth isn't determined by marketplace economics or social hierarchies. It's determined by the people who choose to see it, to nurture it, to build something beautiful with someone everyone else overlooked. And together, they built a love that didn't conquer through force, but through the simple revolutionary act of choosing each other, every day, in a galaxy that said their choice didn't matter. They proved the galaxy wrong.